Welcome to today's session on how critical thinking will save education from AI. I'm Alex Keeler. I am a professional learning consultant with Orion Education and Training. At Orion Education and Training, we are a professional education service center dedicated to supporting schools and districts with tailored growth opportunities. Our professional learning team does hands-on classroom coaching, creates practical resources, and leads interactive trainings. We offer these in person at school sites or at our lovely facility here in Clearwater, Kansas, right outside of Wichita, or virtually. We provide accessible avenues for educators to continue their professional learning and progress on the pay scale, alongside dedicated mentoring and support for administrators, principals, and superintendents. And check us out at orioneducation.org. Here's the big question of the day, right? Will AI replace teachers? No, no, right? That's my gut reaction, right? Is that your gut reaction? No, AI is not going to replace teachers. Or maybe? Maybe they will replace teachers. When you think about it, we've already seen versions of this idea in education before AI ever even arrived. So think about summer school or alternative education programs. Yeah, we've been using these for years, where a student sits in front of a computer, watching some videos, and taking a preset series of quizzes while one single teacher monitors all the subjects in the room at once. So when people talk about AI running at classrooms, it's really not that radical of an idea. The model of an automated content with a teacher acting as a monitor, that already exists. So I just did a little Google search for schools taught by AI. And if you do a Google search for this, you're going to see some results showing that there are already schools being set up around this exact idea. Hence, our presentation today.
There's a high school in Austin, Texas, where AI reigns supreme.
So you've been your own AI?
So this is a video that is taking a look at the Texas Alpha School in Austin. So students spent just 2 hours a morning working on AI software, and that acts as their textbook, a teacher, a quiz, and is a game all in one. And it even monitors their screen to catch if they're procrastinating. The adults in the room aren't even called teachers, they're called guides, and previous teaching experience is not required. Sounds like a good way for the state to save some money. I guess. So when the reporter asked if there was a problem that these guides are not math or subject experts, the leadership, they just said, it's okay. They're not experts in math, but they're experts in their students. And the founder claims that in 10 years, every kid's going to learn everything they need to know on an iPad. And one of the high school students even bragged and said, there's no content you could put in front of us that we can't figure out without a teacher. Now, as educators, when we hear statements like that, it really makes us pause and think about, what is true learning and critical thinking actually look like? In news coverage of this model, an administrator was asked if she had a problem having a teacher in the room who isn't a content expert in what the kids are learning. She said, no, I don't think that's a problem at all. When administrators accept that content expertise isn't required in the room, it really pushes to prove why human pedagogical expertise matters so much. Some key characteristics of AI school might be that they have AI tutors and they have guides instead of teachers, a micro school structure, and an emphasis on lowering costs. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of politicians who would just salivate at the idea of replacing teachers. In a school, the most expensive thing is the staff. So they can really lower costs if we just replace the teachers with AI. And I'm hoping that they don't. So how do we make sure that we show them what is the value of having an actual teacher who knows their stuff in the classroom as opposed to just letting AI teach it? I also saw this article in the New York Times. It was a guest essay. It was pointing out that America's first AI high school, that it's great. It said it's great, but it says the greatness wasn't because of the AI. It's obviously because of the relationships and the people that are in the building. Technology, I think, has a role. There's some things that it does better, but what do we do better? What do we do best in a classroom? What makes great education is that humanizing of education, and I think that takes a highly qualified teacher. Great schools succeed through human connection, a strong culture, and core skill development. Technology can enhance learning, depending on how you use it, but dedicated educators remain the true engine of student success. I don't want to sit at a computer all day learning from a screen, and I doubt our students do either. You see people on social media debating, what is AI's role in education? Is it no role? Is it a small role that it can grade things automatically that are low critical thinking, giving some games? But let's remember, calculators also caused a similar panic in math education years ago, before my time. And we stopped teaching kids how to calculate square roots by hand. I have a degree in math. I don't know how to calculate a square root by hand. Used to be that they would do the rote math, and now we let calculators do it. And that allows us to focus on what do we do with it and to analyze. That's not saying we did that with all math topics, but that is one example of how technology can shift how we taught, but it didn't replace the teacher. I mean, nothing really replaced the teacher's expertise and in the moment decision making. Ultimately, it comes down to this big question. What does it mean to be educated? Whether you're taught by a human, an AI, or taking an online course, at the end of the day, what does it actually mean to be educated? So I asked AI that exact prompt. What does it mean to be educated after graduating from high school or college? What would be the qualities that show this person is well educated? So agree or disagree, here's what AI gave to me. To be truly educated is vastly different from simply being schooled. A degree or diploma just proves you survived a system, met a set of requirements, and absorbed specific information. Education, on the other hand, is what remains after you've forgotten the specific formulas and dates you cram for a final exam. It's what you're capable of doing after the knowledge of the facts. So check out this quote from Albert Einstein. It is, in fact, nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. So, this highlights a major ongoing problem in education, that it's been around for generations. Is school actually making kids curious? Kids are naturally wired to explore, and I personally believe the kids would rather learn than eat if the system allows for it. But so often, traditional schooling accidentally stifles that natural spark. AI isn't what created this problem, but it brings it to the surface. If we aren't helping our students to be curious and to help them to want to learn more, there is some evidence for some politicians that would maybe AI could be a cheaper way to administer education. So here's what AI thought were some qualities of a well-educated person. They analyze arguments, logically spot fallacies, and evaluate sources rather than taking information at face value. They know how to think. A well-educated person recognizes the vastness of what they don't know. They aren't afraid to admit gaps in their understanding or change their minds when presented with better evidence. Graduation merely removes the training wheels. An educated person continues to read, ask questions, explore subjects outside of their immediate field or comfort zone. They remain fascinated by how things work, why people behave the way they do, and how different concepts intersect. They figure out how things work. Can they explain complicated ideas simply without sounding condescending? Do you really know something if you can't communicate it simply? I think the ability to communicate is really going to be one of the most important characteristics students are going to need to develop for the coming future. I'm a Google developer expert for Google Workspace, which means I code. But I'm not writing code very often these days. I vibe code, which means I code with my words, which means I have to be really good at communicating what I want. And this is what we need from our students. How well can they communicate? They engage thoughtfully with the views they disagree with. Just let's sit with that for a minute. We are a society, we are a community, and we're going to be around people who we don't agree with, but we should still be able to get along. So as we interact with people in our world, we have to learn to work respectfully with people we don't agree with. And that in itself is a critical thinking skill. We have to be able to navigate ambiguity. One thing that challenges me as a math teacher is when I pull tasks from ucube.org website, I read the task and I immediately think, there's stuff missing here. My students need some more directions. I'm going to need to fix this up. I got to catch myself because the whole point is that students must make a decision. They have to look at ambiguous information and use critical thinking skills to figure out a path forward, rather than just following textbook directions like a robot. They connect abstract concepts to the real world. They possess the empathy to appreciate different historical, cultural, and social contexts. Empathy is really what makes us human. Is AI helping students to be more empathetic? They consider the broader consequences of their decisions on their community and their environment. In other words, being educated, you know more about the world and you don't just think about yourself. When AI can instantly generate a decent 5-paragraph essay or solve textbook calculus problems, it renders low-order cognitive tasks like memorization and basic synthesis obsolete as a measure of intelligence. Doesn't mean we don't want to teach them how to craft a well-written essay. That's still very important. But if AI can just generate the essay or solve the problem, we have to teach students how to analyze, critique, and evaluate that content. So that brings us to my fave, Webb's depth of knowledge. DOK is like my personal hobby. I love to present on it, but we're not presenting on that today. There are 4 levels of critical thinking. That's what DOK is describing, the depth of knowledge. DOK 1, recall, memorization, following steps. Now, level 2 is students make some sort of a decision. Now think about this. If I were to ask you to build a rocket to the moon and I gave you a binder and had all the steps, it's like a bazillion pages, you're probably going to mess this up. It is probably going to explode. It probably won't work. It'll be hard to build this rocket, but I'm giving you the step-by-step directions and you don't have to make any decisions. That's DOK 1. You're doing something really hard, but it's not complex. You're not reasoning through it. You're not making any decisions. So as we elevate in going through the 4 levels of DOK, we're looking at how complex the reasoning the student is engaged in. So in other words, DOK is the language that we're going to use when we talk about critical thinking. And I'm not giving a talk about DOK today, but I would love to sometime in the future. So stay tuned. I just want to remind you that it is not how hard the problem is. It's the student's complexity of reasoning. Pretty hard to look at this task and you think students will engage it at a particular level. But hey, they can just use AI and take it right down to DOK 0 if they just print out the results without even thinking about what the results are. So when you see the actual students, how much reasoning is the actual student doing, then we can assess the DOK level of the task. We need our students to be well educated, not just know how to use AI. They do need to know how to use AI. I think you need to be educated to use AI well. You have to really know your stuff to make a good prompt. You have to really know your stuff to be able to analyze if the results are good or if they're incorrect or if it's what you're trying to communicate or if you need to provide other information. So when I made this presentation, I spent over 8 hours using Notebook LM, which is now called Gemini Notebook. And I was uploading research articles, challenging my thinking, and curating resources. So when I'm using AI, I'm actively using critical thinking to do that. You have to critically evaluate AI outputs. So right now, I'm in the process of helping my daughter. I have an adult daughter to buy a house. And so I used Gemini Live on my phone and I was looking at realtor.com. So it allows me to share the screen so we can see the realtor.com. So I'm saying, hey, tell me about this house. It seems overpriced. And Gemini just kept repeating back my own opinion to me. It's like, oh, you're so smart. Ugh, I feel like I am in echo chamber a lot of times when I use AI. It didn't fact check me. So I had to use my own critical thinking to research the other property sales. I'm like, hey, Gemini, look at this house and how much square footage it has and what it costs. And look at this other one. Okay, so now help me to figure out, what should I offer? What's a realistic offer price? You just really have to critically evaluate what technology is giving you, what AI is giving you. Now, when I use Gemini Notebook, formerly called Notebook LM, one thing I do is I ask it to evaluate my sources for the goal of the notebook. I don't know if you know this, but in Notebook LM and Gemini Notebook, you can just say, hey, do a deep research report, and it'll bring you back a bunch of websites like Reddit. That's obviously not a good source. So I have to then go through and vet and weed out these sources. And I also go get research articles and I add those in there. And I obviously didn't read all 100 of these sources that I dumped into there. So then I'm asking Gemini Notebook, hey, can you see which of these sources are either low quality or they don't align with my goal? I tell it what's my goal of the notebook to help me to craft a better resource list to help me actually accomplish my goal. But it's not just good enough to have AI tell me, oh, like, hey, get rid of this source. Because one of these sources, I'm like, this might actually be good. It told me that the reason it was getting rid of it is because it was for higher ed. And I'm like, I get that I'm not doing a presentation to higher ed today, but teaching critical thinking is not really domain specific. Like, isn't there some value in this article that I could use? And it's like, oh, of course, you're so right to challenge that. And so I ended up leaving that source in. I did take it out later for a different reason. So just like I had mentioned, AI prompting requires that you have some knowledge. When we just dump in, make a lesson plan, well, anybody off the street can do this. But what does it produce? Not a high quality lesson plan. When we increase this prompt to consider all the nuances of teaching, our full training behind it, the result is obviously much better. And then it requires knowing what is good information to be able to take that draft and fix it up. Same for our students. What expertise do they need to effectively utilize AI and critique the sources and results to make it their own and defend their choices? For this presentation, I was trying to get AI to help me to make some counterexamples at different DOK levels, which it's terrible at. AI generally it doesn't really understand critical thinking, it's processing patterns. So like every single day I'm arguing with AI, it'll spit out a DOK1 recall task and confidently label it as DOK strategic thinking. You have to be the content expert to know when the AI is wrong. Fact checking is critical thinking. It's that active mental habit of saying, wait, that doesn't sound right. Where can I go verify, cross-reference, and corroborate this information? We want our students to be in the habit of always fact-checking, especially in today's day and age of social media and AI. Being educated is knowing how to figure out what sounds like good information versus being actually reliable. We've all heard, teach kids how to think, not what to think. But critical thinking doesn't happen by osmosis, doesn't happen by absorption. Just because you gave them facts doesn't mean they know how to critically analyze with it. You can't just say in your lesson plan, students will analyze, and then think that they're going to know how to analyze. We have to explicitly teach them what that means, how to analyze. A quick way to get started with this is to adjust the learning objective. So look at this traditional history objective. Students will know the causes of the Civil War. That is a low cognitive demand. A student can type that into AI, copy the bullet points, study flashcards, and pass a matching quiz without ever thinking. So now we look at students will evaluate how conflicting economic priorities and arguments over states' rights directly led to the outbreak of the Civil War by analyzing primary source perspectives. So in this learning objective, we're setting the expectation and the objective that students are making decisions. They're weighing evidence. They're analyzing primary sources. Here's a common science objective. Students will know the parts of a food web. Again, that's basic recall. So to elevate it, students will predict and justify how a disruption to one population in a local ecosystem impacts the stability of the entire food web. So this aligns with the next generation science standards because it requires students to construct an argument supported by empirical evidence.
Our objectives today are that you will use rational numbers along with mathematical operations to complete ratio.
Okay, so now this slide is actually a video. While I was building up examples for these learning objectives, Gemini suggested this video on ratios to me. And I'm like, okay, we could give our students this video and they could watch it and then they don't need a teacher. They've been replaced by a video, heck with being replaced by AI. But there is zero interactions here, right? The students watch the video, get the information, and then they mimic it. That's basic DOK1 recall. Simply watching a video or copying down visual representations of ratios doesn't mean deep learning is how a standard math objective might say students will find the unit rate. It's purely procedural. This one was a tricky one to use AI with to elevate the learning objective because using AI really requires critical thinking skills. Now you'll see when I click on this slide, it actually launches it, shows you my Gemini conversation. And what you'll notice about this is how long it is that I am back and forth. It's giving me information. Let's come down here to the math one because I'm really like, what up? This isn't working for me. You don't really understand math standards. This is not the right DOK levels. And we're just going back and forth, where I'm really having to say, like, let me explain DOK to you so you can help me rewrite this better at the level that I want it to be. So if we want students to analyze, we have to break analysis down into concrete, teachable moves. When we put a problem up on the board or into a presentation, a lot of times it looks like magic to students because of our automaticity. We automatically know, I'm a math teacher, which numbers would work or won't work with this strategy, isn't the right one, or even when we're writing, we're actually thinking, formulating, weeding things out. Like I wouldn't word it that way, and it's in the back of our brain, but we have to bring that to the front. Like let students see what we're rejecting, what we decided to use and not use, and just modeling that thinking out loud. We show the mistakes in our thinking because AI doesn't do that very well. We need to show students the actual process of coming to a decision as opposed to just standing up there and saying, and then I did this. As a math teacher, I need my students to hear that internal monologue of why did I try this? What happens if I do this and it doesn't work? Showing these decision points and rejected paths is actually how we get closer to teaching analysis. And then we're going to provide students with repeatable scaffolds. When students are doing, no matter what they're doing, they're not just giving us the answer, but the structure of the activity is asking them to show us their whole thought process from beginning to end. So they're not just giving us that final result. And, I love what do you notice, when do you wonder activity. And for English teachers, right, claim, support, evidence, there's a whole bunch of these different routines where students go through the thinking process, provide all of it, and not just, hey, here's my final answer. Now, here is something I personally struggle with. If we want students to think, it simply takes longer. So we might consider increasing our wait time and giving students that extra space to process. The thing I constantly have to remind myself is that I'm not the answer key. I want my students to have the opportunity to talk through an idea, even say something incorrect while I hold poker face. It's so hard. By not immediately indicating whether they're right or wrong, it invites them to keep the conversation going, keep talking, and more importantly, for them to keep thinking. Can they figure out that it wasn't right before I jump in to rescue them? So when engaging in critical thinking, learners don't necessarily want someone to jump in and rescue them. They just need the time to work through it sometimes. So we consider assessing the process. What did the journey actually look like? What decisions were the students making along the way? What did they choose to include? And what did they choose not to include? What were the different phases of their work? And so instead of the assignment simply being hand in the essay, the assignment becomes show me how you thought through this essay, show me how you came to these conclusions, and share all those messy parts of your thinking. We can also focus on documenting that thinking process by considering questions like, what other questions did you not look at? And from there, we can offer helpful feedback to support students as they go back to refine and improve their work. I love a good feedback loop. Education is not about having the right answer. It's about knowing how to think and communicate your thinking. So thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions or want to bring Orion out to your district for coaching or workshops, please reach out to me, A. Keeler at orioneducation.org.